So you want the best premium Android flagship phone on the market. To me, there are two very obvious contenders here if you want mainstream phones. There's the Galaxy S24 Ultra and the Google Pixel 8 Pro. One of these costs considerably more than the other. We're looking at you, Samsung. The Ultra starts at £1,250 in the UK, Pixel 8 Pro at about $999, and there's a similar gap across other markets like the US and Europe. So which should you buy? I'm Cam Bunton, and in this video, I'm going to tell you. It's not often these days that design plays a major part in the experience of using a phone. After all, most of them are big glass rectangles of one form or another. And that's essentially the case here, but to say there's no difference would be incorrect. From a purely aesthetic standpoint, there's appeal to both approaches. Samsung has that almost utilitarian design approach where the lines, accents and surfaces are all very minimal and clean. The top and bottom are completely flat, the cameras all punch through in their own individual rings, and even on the front with its skinny bezeled display, it's very unfussy. It also has those very right-angled corners which can make it uncomfortable to hold. Pixel couldn't be much more different. The rear glass has those generous curves in it, making it nicer to hold in the palm, and that rounded shaping extends to all four edges and corners to give it a softer look. As for the camera bar across the back, that's iconic at this point, clearly denoting that this is a Pixel phone. Despite having a frame made from titanium, the S24 Ultra is actually a little heavier than the Pixel. Although in truth, both are over 200 grams, so aren't the lightest phones around. Samsung does seem to have the advantage on the durability front though. It's got a newer, tougher Gorilla Glass armor on it, where the Pixel uses Victus 2. Both are water and dust resistant to the same levels, but still, if you ask me which one I preferred holding all day and using, it's the Pixel, no question. So I mentioned about this new Gorilla Glass armor on the front of the S24 Ultra and how it makes the front more durable. But that glass on the front of the phone also has another really neat trick. It cuts out reflections. You put these two side by side and with their screens on or off, you'll see immediately the difference in how they reflect light. Whether they've got a direct light source like my studio lighting reflecting back off them with the screen on or off. Or in fact, even without a direct source, you'll notice the surface of the S24 Ultra is much darker because of that lack of light reflection from around it. It's really important actually and means a couple of things, and firstly is that you can set it to a low brightness and still see everything just as great indoors. Outdoors, it means much better visibility in bright daylight. Not that I've had much of that recently. In daily use, it meant when using the Pixel, I find myself adjusting that brightness upwards more often than I would on the Note. Both are brilliant displays though, with really punchy colours and high peak brightness. Both comfortably over 2000 nits, which means you're unlikely to struggle to see either in any condition. Both are similarly sharp too, with similar refresh rates between 1 and 120Hz, but I found perhaps surprisingly it was the aspect ratio and shape that made more difference than those specs. Because it's larger, completely right-angled and has a wider aspect ratio, video felt just a tiny bit more expansive on the Samsung. So if you're watching full screen video on YouTube as an example, there's less of that crop effect and it's a more enjoyable experience. Now we can't talk Samsung versus Pixel without talking at least a little bit about software. And the important thing out of the way first, both are supported for up to 7 years with updates, which is epic. Massive thumbs up for both, providing they stick to that promise. They're both battling it out in the field of AI too, trying to add useful features to phones in order to make previously complicated edits to photos and text super easy, as well as generating wallpapers, translating voice, and all sorts of other stuff. Now, it is worth noting here a lot of what Samsung offers here with Galaxy AI, Google either started first and it's a little way ahead, or Samsung just used Google's service and baked it into the software. However, Samsung has the S Pen, and this is a real difference maker. Its market appeal I think is still a little niche, but it's super handy for drawing, writing, making annotations and signing documents. Personally, I find it most useful for just giving my right hand a break from holding this giant phone. I can rest it in my left and use the pen to interact with the phone. Oh, and it can act as a remote control for the phone camera too. Super handy. Now, unless you absolutely have to have the best performing, fastest, most powerful phone on the market, in which case you likely won't be looking at either of these, there's no massive difference between how it feels to use a Pixel 8 Pro or the S24 Ultra. Now, I will caveat that by saying the S24 Ultra does have a more powerful processor. So in terms of high intensity games and demanding apps, it's the phone that will serve you better and is more efficient with that power. Load the really demanding games on it and the S24 will run those high graphics settings pretty comfortably at 60 frames per second. The Pixel 8 Pro struggles a bit with those and also benchmarks quite a lot lower. But then Pixel has never been about raw power. It's about having a useful, smart phone. Pixel 8 Pro's chipset still offers fast, smooth performance, and both feel really responsive to touching and swiping gestures thanks to that 120Hz display on the front. As for battery life, it very much depends on how you use them, but again, with its more efficient, powerful processor, Samsung's phone tends to sip battery juice more sparingly when doing things like gaming or watching Netflix, so it will last longer for those with heavier screen time. And because it supports up to 45-watt charging speeds, it'll refill faster too. Cameras now, and there are a few reasons for this, but for the most part, it was the Pixel 8 Pro I thought produced better images when I took them out side by side. Although saying that, both are very strong. Samsung's phones have, for as long as I can remember, produced photos that have super saturated colours, especially green and blue, when taking photos with skies, grass or plant life in it. When you combine that with the increased contrast versus the Pixel, it can end up producing shots that just don't seem all that realistic. I often found wherever there was a subject or item with bright light shining on it, that bright light would be very bright and overexposed, where the shadowed area of that same image would be very dark, without much in the way of gradient between light and dark, or much lifting of detail from the shadows. Pixel was a bit better at this, and the photos from the Pixel had a more natural tone to them generally. Both cameras have a dedicated 5x zoom lens, and so you can take good shots with both, with possible sharpness and detail even as high as 10 times. Go over that and things start to fall off a bit. Samsung's take on a textureless, over-sharpened oil painting look where Pixel gets hazy and a bit blurry. I did also sometimes find the zoom on the camera with the Samsung struggled with motion blur, not always effectively removing that shakiness from using it handheld despite its stabilization. And it was a similar story at night time, where Samsung photos had an unusual green tint in its natural mode and often overexposed the highlights, and while generally being brighter, the pictures did have an artificial look to them. Using them completely handheld again in night mode, where algorithms and lens stabilization should get rid of any blur caused by hand movement, the Pixel did a much better job, as you can see when using the extreme test of pointing it at a starry sky. Although in these very low light scenes there's more noise and grain in the Pixel image. Shooting video, again I think the results from the Pixel were better. Samsung automatically tending to overexpose light and oversaturate colours meant the results had an unusual hyper-real look to them without much contrast or sharpness being added. In the end, when I look at the complete packages, it's true that these two phones are pretty evenly split. I think each phone has a couple of strong reasons to pick that phone over the other one. On the Pixel side, you have that camera system which takes better looking images in most conditions and seems to do it easier. And you also have the price point that's comfortably cheaper than Samsung's top tier phone, and of course there's the bloat-free, clean Pixel software. On Samsung's side you have that epic display with the anti-reflective performance which elevates the experience more than you'd think it would. It also is more powerful, faster, smoother, but it's also expensive. And of course there's the S Pen which adds that extra little feature. So which should you buy? Well, on balance, considering the price point and the camera performance, I think the Pixel 8 Pro is the better choice for most people. But if you care more about display and performance, and you love that design and you want the S Pen, then absolutely, the Galaxy S24 Ultra is a fantastic phone. Let me know what you think of these two phones in the comments down below, or you can get me on Threads. I'm at Cam Bunton. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, tap subscribe and that notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.